Hi, I'm Professor Beck Strah.
And I'm Professor Eric Bronson, and this is Prison Breakdown.
2, 3, break!
Hate to spoil his fun, but we're gonna bust out of here.
2, 3, break!
I'm locked in here with you. You're locked in here with me.
2, 3, break!
I can honestly say I'm a changed man. No danger to society here. God's honest truth.
2, 3, break!
I'm not leaving this cell. I'll get out my way. The right way.
2, 3, break!
Ahoy, dudes, and welcome back to Prison Breakdown. I'm here joined by my co-host with the co-most, Tiny B, Dr. Eric Bronson. Hello.
I love it. That's going to a tiny B. That's fun. We're going to start using that. And producer Britt, how are you doing today?
I am fantastic. Thank you.
All right. I'm excited about today's topic. I love this. This is fun stuff.
Quite a lot in store. Yeah. And our topic of today is tattoos. Now, what can you tell me about tattoos?
Well, before we get into our big subject, can we get some news off the razor wire?
Fresh news, hot off the razor wire.
All right. 215 people have been buried behind a Mississippi jail since 2016, according to an attorney in Mississippi. Families of people who were buried in the paupers field next to the Hines County Penal Farm near Jackson, Mississippi, are calling for a federal investigation into the burials, which took place without families being notified. With their attorney now saying the field holds hundreds more graves, the families want a full accounting of the bodies buried there. So this has become national news. When some families started to state that they've waited for months to hear about missing loved ones, only to find out that their relative had died months earlier and they were buried in a grassy field. This also became a hot topic earlier this month due to a case where an individual, let's see, Dexter Wade, who's 37 years old, was reportedly being pursued by the police and taken into custody, and then went missing. And come to find out, he is buried behind the jail. And this happened just recently here in January, or excuse me, where the mother of Dexter Wade, Mama Wade, just found out that her son was buried last month in the fields behind the jail. So we for those folks who don't know, all states and the federal system have burial grounds for inmates who pass away while they're incarcerated, where the family either chooses not to or cannot claim the body. So they have a place to bury individuals. At a lot of states, they consolidate, meaning they don't have burial grounds at every single institution, and so they will bury them at one or two different places or several different places if you're in a large state. But this does not sound like anything that is being regulated or watched. And the worst thing about it is the family members are not being notified. But there's also, it's very interesting that since 2016, they've had over 215 individuals buried there. That just, to me, that seems like an extremely high number for Jackson, Mississippi. I don't think the population is that large.
For sure.
216 individuals would be like, oh yeah, that makes sense because they got a massive population in Jackson, Mississippi. But So obviously this is because of the attention that it's getting. The media is on it. Social media is all over this. The feds are now looking into the situation.
So can we open the floor for questions?
Absolutely.
First question. When we have a graveyard like this next to or behind a prison, are families able to visit their loved ones there?
Yes, they can. Because the graveyard, other than our favorite place in Louisiana, which we will be attending in the fall, the burial grounds are outside of the institutions. So, but down at Louisiana State Penitentiary in Angola, it is actually inside the institution, but the family members who want to go visit the gravesite are allowed to do that by checking in. Down
Still
in Louisiana
would be tough. Imagine having to deal with that, like having to get a day pass just to visit the grave of a loved one.
Right. And
are you able to visit if it's say it's a friend? Can I go visit a friend's grave if they're buried behind institution walls?
Yes, you can. The toughest one is, we know from time to time there are family members that get locked up, and so if you have a brother or sister who's buried behind a wall, and you yourself have a felony record, then you can't go and pay respects at the grave, because they aren't going to let you inside the institution.
Good point. Interesting point. And is it only inmates who are buried in those cemeteries?
Oh, I don't know. That's a good question. That's something I think we need to look into. That's quite
like, could I be buried there if I wanted to?
Yeah, I guess if you want to.
Yeah, if you have a relative or something there, can you opt to be buried next to them?
Well, I think, in all seriousness, I think that for individuals who aren't working there or are not incarcerated, you cannot be buried there. So, we can't. Now, if you have if you're a spouse of someone who's buried, I don't think you can join. What they would say, I imagine, and I can look into this and find out what they would say, is that if you want to be buried with your spouse, come claim the body and take them outside the institution.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. And question pertaining to, what was the name of the disappeared gentleman?
So from down in Mississippi, let me get to it real quick. Bronson Wade is the mother
Great name.
of Dexter Wade. Dexter Wade is 37. All right. And the police told her that she was told recently that he was buried in that pauper's field. But last October, she filed a missing persons report that her son had disappeared, and come to find out, there was a police chase, and then he ended up buried behind the jail.
Fascinating. And does anyone know what happened to him? Is there any official record that could say he died in prison at this time?
So that's where this, this thing gets kind of turned into after school special almost. There's been a real lack of communication between the police department, the correctional staff, the prosecuting attorney about what happened. The coroner's office hasn't been very forthcoming with information. But there was supposedly an accident that took place, and there's an investigation that was still ongoing. So it sounds like there are a lot of unanswered questions right now, which is, explains why there's such a call and desire to have, an investigation taking place.
Interesting. And it also opens up this issue I guess I hadn't really thought about very much, where if you're incarcerated, there's this Schrodinger's cat quality to your life in relation to the people on the outside. So the mom does not know the son's status. She does not know, I believe Dexter was his name. She doesn't know if Dexter's alive or dead. She has no idea what's going on with him unless he chooses to reach out and communicate with her, unless she schedules a visit, right? Like he has to make the outgoing call. He has to reply by mail. He has to show up for the visit. But otherwise, maybe the reporting procedures have broken down and they're not communicating with relatives like they should be.
Well, so it's interesting because I know I heard it when I got a little information, and that I might have caught a piece from the Mississippi Broadcasting Company, the NPR affiliate in Mississippi, who was covering out of Jackson, and they said that originally when Dexter Wade left, there was a little bit of an argument between him and his mom. So that adds to this in terms of, oh, well, he's mad at me, so of course he's not going to answer my phone. Of course, maybe I'm going to give him some space, give him some time. So yeah, it's it's kind of like the perfect storm of, okay, he leaves angry, then ends up, in some type of, whether it was a police chase or an accident. Again, we're still waiting for information. Whether it was one of these things where he was on foot, because there's one report that says he was struck and killed by a police SUV.
Wow.
And then for them to, okay, if that happened on the side of the road and then they take the body to the jail and bury it without reaching out to any family, that's horrible. And of course the mom's never going to know that her child has died. When they're trying to hide it or something, because that's what this just screams of, is that they're hiding something here.
Sure. And it also seems cold-blooded, like they're punishing the family for the transgressions of the children.
Right.
And that's completely unfair.
Yeah.
Wow. That is fascinating. Please keep us updated as the story develops. Any other majestic prison news this week there?
No. That is it for our prison news for this episode.
All right. Thank you, Razor Wire. Let's move on to the main event of the day. We're talking tats. We're talking tattoos. We're talking tatties. Does anyone call them tatties?
Tatties.
All right. Well, maybe it could catch on after this podcast.
What I was wondering if that was an Alaskan term for tattoos, and I didn't know it. Prison ink, right? That's what we're talking about.
Prison ink. Yes. Let's talk about it. What do you know about it? What's the scoop? Producer Britt, Bronson, what do you two know about prison tattoos?
Well, I know they, first off, they're not very bright. They consistently dark colors, black or blue, which the blue ink tends to look either really dark gray or black, because the ink that's available to the inmates within the institution, taken from pens, and most institutions, for every form, you have either blue or black pens hanging around.
Yeah, it often does not look as good as a lot of other tattoos I've seen. I'm sure there are good ones out there. I haven't seen as many as I'd hope.
Yeah.
But we know that there are talented artists being incarcerated, so maybe it's more of a quality of materials thing. Mm-hmm. The tattooing process, though, in prison, it's got so many steps. First, you have to get the materials. You have to hide the materials. These are materials that would be considered contraband. And we've already talked about contraband at length, so I won't go too far into it. But it requires those things. Often it requires finding another inmate to tattoo you, a location to complete this tattoo where the corrections officers won't see, and also having a lookout for the corrections officers. So there's so many moving parts to this whole process.
I gotta think that probably the most difficult part of that, like you said, is the location. Not just because you have to, hide away from the staff, but you need to find, for the most part, somewhere to plug your little noob tattoo gun that you're using in, and that's outlets are not just randomly placed throughout the institution. No, they're hard to find. So I think that's one of the toughest parts about the Prison Ink is finding that outlet.
That, and maybe not attracting the attention of staff with the noise that might come out of your homemade tattoo gun. We often find that the artists and inmates who are able to tattoo are compensated in some way. They're treated well because people want to be on their good side. They want to make sure their tattoos are done well. From former inmate tattoo artists, we know that they might make up to around $20 an hour. And this money comes in, like the Rhode Island Department of Corrections allows family and friends to send money to inmates over the phone and through deposit kiosks that are in the prisons themselves, on the outside areas, the more public-facing sections. So people could get money on their books that way, have a friend or family member drop money on somebody else's books, or even trade soups or stamps or whatever the currency is of the facility.
Little Debbie's.
Little Debbie's.
Yeah, Little Debbie's. So, how many Little Debbie's is a tattoo? What do we gotta? How many Little Debbies do we need to make it worth the artist's time? That's a tough one, isn't it?
It is a tough one. This also needs to consider that the artists often, the labor in prisons is so significantly underpaid, where they might make like 50, 60 cents an hour would be a decent job in some prisons. So maybe they're just sitting there not doing anything else with their time. And so this is something for them to do. It's tough to think about, like, what drives inmates to even do this in the first place.
I was gonna say that, like, even $20 an hour seems like a decent wage or something, but for a tattoo artist, that is significantly deflated. That's about 1/10 of what an average tattoo artist makes on the outside.
Right. So maybe we need, forget the Little Debbies, we need the Big Deborahs. Right? That's what we're going to pay them with, Big Deborahs.
So in terms of the equipment, the machines are made often from like pens, deodorant labels, broken spoons. You get a motor from a beard trimmer, a CD player, or a tape player, or something like that if they're allowed. And then the needle. They will take the springs from pens. I've had multiple inmates, when I'm giving surveys, inmates will try and remove the spring from my pen, and I'll notice my pen doesn't click like a pen should click. And then I'll say, give me back the spring. And they know it's all a game for them. They go, all right, fine. And they've given it back, no problem. But
you know,
one of the other, they can use.
You know, one of the other fun things that the inmates that I found, because I'd seen the springs before. I'd gone into work one day and the spring was missing from my pen, and one of my, this is when I was still learning what the hell was going on. One of my coworkers told me, like, oh, an inmate stole it for a tattoo gun, probably. But one of the other things an officer brought up one time when I was touring a prison in Ohio was the inmates would steal from the musical arts room. They would steal guitar strings, and they would use that, the guitar strings that weren't the plastic that they were the hard corded one, and they would use that to on their tattoo guns, which I just, I really thought that was quite interesting. They're like, oh, well, I guess that would work. But
yeah, fascinating.
Yeah.
But these are things that not all incarcerated persons have access to either. What the final one to mention would be a spring from a stapler. Same idea as the spring from a pen.
Why
So
not just a
that would be your
staple at that
needle.
point?
I don't know.
You know, you use a spring, you got to straighten it out. Why not just the staple?
Do you think it has to do with the length of the needle?
Yeah, you want like something you can wrap around the motor. So yeah.
There we go.
Yes, and disclosure to our listeners, I've never gotten a tattoo before. Why do I keep saying it tattoo? I've never had a tattoo before.
I didn't know if that was a West Coast thing that you were a tattoo.
No, I don't know why I'm saying it. We'll go back to calling them tatties.
All right, tatties.
So, what do they use for ink?
Well, you can start with the ink from some pens that you've stolen, but they can also melt down. I'm forgetting right now, but they can melt down and they can use that with a little bit of color. Boy.
Melted checkers and chess pieces.
There we go.
That's one thing they melt down. They will also use Bible pages, toothpaste, boot polish, and burnt ash.
Yeah, charcoal. Charcoal can be used for ink.
Bible pages?
Yeah, Bible pages. I'm not exactly sure how that works. I assume that probably gets filed under burnt ash as well. Like maybe they would have to burn the Bible pages.
Oh,
Water.
That's a holy tatty, right?
Yeah, now we're using preferred nomenclature.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, for the history of prison tattoos, inmates used to be forcibly tattooed in some areas for punishment. It was a form of embarrassment and this permanent mark of being a criminal, the scarlet letter idea. In the 18th century, in France, thieves were forced to wear this tattoo, this V on their shoulder. It meant voleur or thief. The significance of prison tattoos. There are 5 types of prison tattoos depending on their design, message, and motive behind their creation. The first, we have these the commodified types of tattoos, the purchase tattoos. They are used to construct the inmate's body image. They allow for the confirmation of their value and proof that the prison system did not manage to break them. One former inmate, Dorde Valajlevic, I think I'm getting that name right. He claims he chose to get a large tattoo that can always be visible as a reminder to himself to never go back to prison. We also have Nazi tattoos. These types of tattoos do not necessarily have just an anti-Semitic meaning, but it also states hate for African Americans, as well as this white solidarity and white supremacy in general. As we know, the United States has this significantly disproportionate number of African Americans in our prisons and jails, and the Nazi tattoos send this message to other racial minority inmates that is threats, direct or indirect. We also have gang tattoos.
When I was working at the prison in Kentucky, to be honest, I guess one of the things that I remember that struck me was the number of inmates that had swastikas. It really, I expected to see, just a few of them, but it was a much larger percentage of that. I'm maybe 30 inmates had swastikas, at least that I saw. Now, part of that was some of the time I would work over in the rec area, so I was more likely to see them working out, and when they would do that, they'd take their shirt off while they were lifting, so you could see more of their tattoos. But it was much more common. Now, the other thing is that obviously, we're looking at a state that that is predominantly white or black, and so for the most part, that it was a white supremacist tattoo. As you were mentioning, it wasn't simply anti-Semitism. It was a white power tattoo.
Yeah. I surprisingly have not seen that many Nazi tattoos during my time working in prisons and jails. The one memorable time I did see them, this inmate comes up to me, and he was a white dude with Nazi tattoos, swastikas, and what was it? The 8-8 for
Heil Hitler.
The eighth letter being H for Heil Hitler.
Yep.
Dude comes up to me, and there was a new inmate on the block who needed to be assigned to a cell. New inmate on the block was a black dude, and this Nazi comes up to me and he says, "You better not put that guy in my cell, otherwise there's going to be trouble." And it was a real dilemma, because on one hand, I don't want to cave in and just go along with what this Nazi's saying. Nobody would want to.
Right.
Who's
right.
At least, like, I can't say nobody, but like, it's something that fundamentally I'm against. But on the other hand, you have to look out for the safety of the new guy on the block.
Right.
And so the only time that segregation is legal in prisons is when it's something like that, where it is to keep somebody safe or keep a group of somebody's safe.
Yeah.
And so I ended up putting the new guy in a different cell and shuffling people around a little bit so I could make some more room. But not a fan of this guy giving me this ultimatum.
Right. But on the other hand, hey, at least he came to you and said, "Hey, don't do that or else," because who knows what it could have set off at the institution. Maybe you were able to, divert a bad situation.
Sure. Maybe there was some violence prevented that day, hopefully.
Yeah.
And so back to the types of tattoos. We also have gang tattoos. I'm sure we've all seen plenty of gang tattoos in the community and in prison and jail settings. They are the signs of commitment to a very small and specific community. Gang-related tattoos done in prison can result in strong disciplinary action against the recipient, and often it will be worse than if the tattoo is not gang-related. And people with gang tattoos are often targeted by staff in prison environments, and they are more often sent to solitary confinement just for separating gang members to eliminate risks. So say I've got Bloods and Crips in my unit. Some of them might be shipped off to separate or even solitary type of units. Religious iconography is also huge in terms of tattoos, popular throughout inmate populations, and often these will signal some kind of change in an incarcerated person's behavior or their way of life. And have you ever heard of the memento mori tattoo?
No, I sure have not. No.
The symbol represents an inevitability of death. It's often designed as a skull with roses.
Oh, nice. I like that.
Yeah, pretty cool. Pretty badass.
It sounds like there are Facebook groups that would protest that.
I don't want to die. Yes.
Yeah.
Inmates will often enjoy tattooing on the inside. It allows them to feel the pleasure of bucking the trend against prison administration, showing they got one over on the staff. And many inmates will get excited to break rules and test the administration, feeling like they have some sense of control or power. Being able to get away with giving or receiving a tattoo expresses that the system and security measures are not tight enough. And inmates also choose to have tattoos to look tough. The tougher you look in prison, the more authority you have, the more respect you will be afforded in a prison hierarchy.
Yeah, think about it. If you can, just pure intimidation can either, get you out of a situation, a negative situation, maybe a fight, maybe, that it helps keep inmates from exploiting you. But it could also, help you do a little bit of your own time. Whereas if you have some artwork on your, let's say, neck or face, that might keep some groups from bothering you. So, maybe it has a little bit of a deterrent effect.
Yeah, exactly that idea. And another one that might have a deterrent effect is the teardrop tattoo. Now, are you familiar with the significance of the teardrop tattoo?
Oh yeah, there's a lot of fun. Of course, it depends which group is using it, right? If it's a gang or if it's just somebody, and it depends which eye it's under in terms of whether or not they've, blood in, blood out, for a gang, that type of situation, or whether or not they've killed somebody while incarcerated. So there's a few different meanings to find with the teardrop, right?
Indeed. It totally depends on the state. It depends on the institution. Like inmates in Louisiana will have teardrop tattoos just to have them. But traditionally, the meaning is that if you have a teardrop under your left eye, it is like a tally on the cell wall. It's signifying how long you've spent in prison. If you have it under your right eye, it signifies dead bodies, how many bodies you've accrued, how many people you've killed.
Yeah, that's fine. Seeing somebody that has multiple teardrops, out in public, you always go, oh, well, we know what they're trying to convey, right? That they're trying to say, I did some time, or maybe, I was in a gang out on the streets and I took care of business. And yeah, that could be rather intimidating for people. And as you said, having something like that can make you more an imposing figure while you're incarcerated.
Bingo. Now, we also see Russian incarcerated persons have their own code that is demonstrated through tattoos. Like if you have a cat tattoo, it signifies that you're a thief. Inmates will often give themselves these tattoos. A single cat signifies that you worked alone. If you have multiple cat tattoos, it shows that you work in a group of thieves.
Nice.
Yeah, pretty cool.
Well,
good for cat people.
Yeah. Do you get to name the cats when you have them? Like,
like, this is Bartholomew.
Here's Mittens.
I don't think that's as intimidating.
No.
Russian prisoners also have other tattoos, like a star. Each point on the star will represent a year spent in prison. Barbed wire on someone's head means that they are doing life in prison without parole. And if they have birds on the horizon, that means that they are longing for freedom. So that's interesting. We've got a whole separate code just specific to persons from Russia.
Yeah, that's fun. And it's, we tend to look at people from other countries as being exotic, right? And so a lot of that artwork they might have on their skin could be seen as something that's rather exotic, and therefore people might want to copy it and say, hey, I want that too. Not knowing what the meanings are, the implications are when you get something like that.
Indeed. We also have, I want to circle back around to gang tattoos. So for gangs, the spider web tattoo, are you familiar with this tattoo? You will often see it like on an elbow.
Yes. Yeah, it's one, I think it's one of the two most popular ones you can see out in society, and know if somebody's, done some time.
Yeah. And in itself, it signifies that person spent time in prison, or they spent time caught in the web of the inescapable gang lifestyle.
And the bigger the web, the longer the time.
There you go.
Yeah.
And tattoos have these different significant meanings for many gang members and members of the mafia even. They're often seen as tokens of recognition, and they're earned based on actions that were taken for the gang. And there can be some bad consequences for getting gang-related tattoos without earning them. It's seen as stolen valor among those circles.
I love that. Yeah, I love that we're going to take something like valor, but yeah, we can understand that if you're stealing another gang's, colors or ink or their artwork, whatever, their image, they're going to be upset. But yeah, that's it's often, you know, because I remember hearing inmates talk about, you know, somebody having taken their tattoos and using it, and that it was stolen valor. So it was interesting that you used that same exact phrase.
Yeah, I love stories of stolen valor. It'll pop up once or twice a year. It's always interesting. I never quite understand why the person's doing it, but this need for attention that someone would engage in the idea of stolen valor is always interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely it is.
So as you and I probably know, many of the tattoos that we see in prisons will explain the crime that the person committed to send them to prison. And this type of tattoo can be good or bad. It can be good if the crime they committed helped the gang, but it's also sometimes used as punishment, where it's something they have to wear. It's visible for everyone to see. It's involuntary for the wearer. And so some tattoos can be bad if it was against the gang or brought down the gang. It's used to shame them and label them as traitors.
Yeah, there was an interesting case years ago. This is from before you were born. So we're going back to Papaw's time. But there was an inmate who didn't understand all the rules of the institution before they went in. They weren't very street savvy there at the Kentucky State Penitentiary. And there were, you know, we're using the inmate statuses. There's a pack of wolves that were repeatedly assaulting this individual, both physically and sexually. And when this individual went ahead and found out he got paroled, and they gave him his date. You know, when you get paroled, you don't just leave the parole room board, right? You still have a lot, you know, a month or 3 weeks or 6 weeks before you actually get out when you're paroled.
Yeah, there's steps to be taken.
And in that situation, you don't let people know that you're leaving, because a lot of times they'll start, you know, stealing from you or whatever. They might try and get you into some trouble. But this guy went up to this group of individuals, this pack of wolves who were assaulting him, and kind of threw it in their face. Ha ha, I got paroled. I'm getting out of here. Well,
not the best idea.
No, and I guess within the next week, they went ahead and held him down and gave him, you know, as we would say, tatties on his back. Very large letters across his shoulders, shoulder blades, KSP for Kentucky State Penitentiary. And down around his waist, they wrote punk. And in between those, they put some male genitalia. So you think about this, you know, obviously it wasn't done with care. It's not like any of it looks nice. Not that you need it to look nice, right? You'd say, these guys held me down and tattooed me, but oh, look at the artistry. That's just not what happened. But
no, this is horrible.
Yeah, exactly. Horrible. This guy's marked for life as a prison punk. And so, you know, if he ever gets locked up again, you know, the same fate is going to befall him and wherever he goes in any institution. So, yeah, sometimes it's you know, other situations where people have been held down and they've been tattooed rat on them or snitch. Yeah, it really is something that can have an awful impact, because it's not, you know, the state isn't going to do anything to help you out with that tattoo if they got you.
Yeah, right. They're not going to offer tattoo removal services or anything like that.
No.
That's a horrifying story.
Yeah. Yeah. The state is not going to get you that laser treatment to get that tattoo off you. Jeez.
Yeah, I wish. So there's a lot we don't know about gang tattoos. So many gangs just don't tell other groups about their symbols and tattoos. So there's plenty that we don't know. But of what we do know, there's a few gangs like the Crips, the Bloods, MS-13, where some of their symbols are really prominent. Like the Crips will have a symbol of a 3-pointed crown and a 6-pointed crown, and they will use codes in their tattoos. So they will use numbers in replacement for the affiliated letters. So if you want to write a word, for example, A is the number 1. B is the number 2. So it will be spelled out in numerals. So if you use 211, that means BK, and that's not Burger King. This is Blood Killer, meaning that this person who's a member of the Crips has killed a member of the Bloods, their rival gang. The Bloods also use code, but they split the alphabet in half. They replaced the letters from the first half to those on the second half. So the first half of the alphabet, A through M, and then N through Z. So the letter A becomes the letter N. The letter N becomes the letter A. It sounds confusing, but they would write out letters on themselves like that, and it's essentially written in code. Other popular tattoos for Bloods are MOB, Member of Blood, CK, which means Crip Killer or Cop Killer, and you also see the dog paw as a popular symbol.
I think we need to combine that with the Russian tattoo, and we'll just have the cat paw.
Yes.
That's what I think you need to do, Beck. You need to get a tattoo of a little kitty paw.
More cat tattoos. Yes.
You mean a tattoo?
Oh, yes. Thank you.
Woo.
You're welcome.
I won't thank you. MS-13 is another one of the most dangerous and feared gangs in the world. They are an El Salvadoran gang. Popular symbol for them is a skull on the left hand and 3 dots on the left wrist. It symbolizes the 3 places that members will end up, and those 3 places are said to be the cemetery, the prison, and the hospital. Devil horn tattoos can also represent membership to the gang, and some members will avoid obvious MS-13 tattoos and prefer hidden meaning symbols of the gang, which, because they're hidden, we don't necessarily have the information to tell us what those would be.
It's very interesting when you look at pictures from El Salvador and their prison system, and man, a lot of those gang members down there are, they have more ink than they do untouched skin. They really cover themselves. It's again, maybe it's done for intimidation, or maybe it's done to show, hey, I am so aligned and I've got this allegiance towards my gang and nothing else matters. It's very, they end up looking rather foreboding, just from getting these tattoos.
Yeah, and in El Salvador, incarceration is a real problem, like it is in the U.S., where it's so many people are locked up there, and I forget who's running El Salvador right now, but it's one of those things that they'll brag about is the prison populations.
Right, and how strict they are, right?
Indeed, yes, it is. It is rough. Interestingly, I recently finished a book on the folly of Bitcoin, and the president of El Salvador had announced that Bitcoin was becoming the national currency of El Salvador, and apparently there's still very few places that will accept Bitcoin there. It's so much more of a pain in the ass than just using like a credit card, and so people don't want to use it. It's not that popular there, but the president is gung-ho trying to get it off the ground.
Huh. Well,
anyway, back to tattoos.
Is it just because of people, just because the Bitcoin's collapsing, or is it more because just the people Latin American people aren't buying into it? This is interesting.
It's not entirely stable. Interestingly, when he announced that it was going to be
is this Bukele? Isn't it? I'm not sure if I'm saying that.
Yeah, right. That's his name. That's his name, okay. Bukele, and he announced it for the first time, I believe, at a crypto conference in Miami in 2021, and after that, he gave every resident of El Salvador received $30 in Bitcoin. and he really wanted to get it off the ground in that way. It's just too much of a pain in the ass is the problem with Bitcoin there.
Yeah.
It's not fast and efficient to make the transactions, especially compared to something like credit cards where you at least get points, and then you can allot those points toward travel or hotels or whatever you want, whatever your credit card is for.
Interesting. All right.
But going back to tattoos, I would highly recommend the book though. Number Go Up. It's enlightening.
Okay.
Best thing I've read in a while. Now, actually, back to tattoos. The Black Gorilla family. They are a gang that was formed initially in San Quentin State Prison. Their goals are to end racism and overthrow the U.S. government. And some of the common tattoos they have are BGF for Black Gorilla Family, or the number 276, which is just the numbers representing the letters, as I had just discussed with like crypt tattoos. They also use a crossed machete and rifle, or a black dragon climbing the San Quentin prison tower. Now, the final group I'll talk about is white supremacy, associated with white gangs of neo-Nazis like the Aryan Brotherhood. 1488 is a very popular tattoo. Now, I mentioned the 88 already. 8 represents the 8th letter of the alphabet. 88 is HH. H being the 8th letter of the alphabet, meaning Heil Hitler. And then the 14 represents the leader David Lane's quote with the 14 words. White supremacists know these 14 words, and the 14 words are, "We must secure the existence of our people and a future for white children." That's something that they live by.
Yeah. Yep.
So that they get that marked on them in tattoos is 1488.
Yeah, as someone born in 1988, I feel the year was pretty unfortunate. I can't have my birth year as my screen name for anything.
Consider people born in 1488. What are they supposed to do?
Yeah, what do they use for their screen names, right?
Now, it's some of the problems that can come from tattoos. Infection is a huge one. Tattooing is often prohibited in prisons because of the infections and diseases that can result. Needles are scarce in prisons, as we discussed, but tattooing involves breaking the skin and potential blood contact, which causes this risk for bloodborne diseases like HIV and hepatitis C. Prisons are not well known as being the most sanitary places. They're often, if you walk into any cell, it's often an unsanitary location, and incarcerated persons have these limited resources for cleaning. Prison is also home to a lot of persons with hepatitis C and other bloodborne diseases. If we look at the proportion of people inside of prison and outside of prison that have hepatitis C, for example, it is much larger proportion inside prison. Often incarcerated persons will also share needles and other tattoo equipment just due to this lack of resources. So there have been calls for tattoos to be legalized in prisons, and that would mean providing inmates with proper tools so they can do it safely. And the idea is it's a harm reduction strategy. If people are going to create their own tattoos, either way, we might as well. And to sterilize to date, they've done something called burning the needle. They do this by what they would call popping a socket with a stinger. Which is, Eric, can you explain a stinger?
Yeah, we just plug. I mean, the most generic ones I've seen is they will they'll go and rip the plugs off, or the power cords off of something they can find, a small appliance that happens to be sitting around somewhere, and they'll just cut that down and expose the wires just so they can heat something up a little bit, run a current through it, and warm it up. So yeah. And it
exactly.
works.
So they can create a spark.
Yeah.
Create a little zap. And so they use that little zap that comes from a stinger to burn the needle.
So since we're talking about these clean needle programs and tattoos, are you going to talk about what Canada did?
Tell us about what Canada did.
Oh my, this is wonderful. This goes back to 2004, 2005. in Canada, in their federal prisons, they in 6 of the prisons, they installed tattoo parlors and regulated the prisons. And the main goal was to kind of, obviously watch what the inmates are tattooing. All right. So they have a little bit of control over what the tattoo the inmate receives. But the biggest reason they were doing this was to try and drop the rate of AIDS, HIV, and hepatitis C being contracted in the institution. So the rates in Canada at the time were something like 10% higher for AIDS and HIV, but it was something like 40 times higher inside the institutions and in public for Hep C. So they ran this for about a year. And it was very controversial because it was the government funded this program, and it was something like $700,000 or $750,000 they put into this. But they were one of the ways they could say it is we're training inmates with they're giving them a trade here because they're good when they leave here. They could be tattoo artists, and we're helping encourage them to when they leave to find a job. And we're going to slow down the rates of these infectious diseases. But there was very little support from it. Obviously, from the community, they didn't get the public behind it, and then of course the officers did not like it at all. And what the officers said was, the ink from the parlors kept getting stolen, and they were still getting illegal tattoos out on the yard or in the cell block. But yeah, so they ran that for a year and then killed it. So I think it ended in early 2006. But yeah, it was talk about a progressive program, but they gave up on it.
Right?
Yeah.
It's an interesting idea. I really like the idea of harm reduction.
Exactly.
It's giving them something to do. It might not be like a boredom tattoo is maybe not in anyone's best interest, but at least it gives them something to do, and they can learn a trade that they can practice and make significant amounts of money on the outside by working their artistry.
Yeah.
Producer Britt, you look like you got
someone
something
who's
to say.
gotten several boredom tattoos. You're spot on.
So are you saying there might be a couple you regret and some that you still love?
No, I don't have any I regret because I got them covered up. So.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
No, well, I don't know. It's I think it was a great program. I would have loved to have seen it, run for a little while longer. But to think, is there any place in the United States where that might fly? Is there any state where that might be? I mean, is Massachusetts the only hope to get this kind of program going? Or, I mean, taxpayers would lose their mind that inmates are getting cheap tattoos. I don't know.
I think it could be cool if we did it so Massachusetts, for example, has the Northeastern Correctional Center, which is a restaurant where inmates learn to cook food, they learn to serve food, and they're in charge of the whole operation. What about a minimum security prison where inmates are allowed to practice the craft of tattoo artistry? And you can go in there and they treat it like an artist school, and where you would go to maybe like a dentist in training, and you would pay less for a dentist. There you pay a little less than you would on the outside, but I'm sure you would get some great artists who are practicing their craft.
Yeah. But I guess one of the things you have to sign off for, well, the tattoo that you get is what you got to live with. Right. Well,
true.
While
there'd be a lot of waivers.
That's a deal whenever you get a tattoo anywhere, though. So
that's true. That's true.
What you get is what you get.
Oh, let me ask you this, producer Britt. Did you ever get one of those where if you, when the artist says, if you let me pick the one, I'll do it for free?
Yeah, I've gotten some cheaper tattoos flashed. Yeah. You can oftentimes you can like go in and be like, hey, do you have anything on your books that you really want to do? And then they'll usually do like a special deal for you.
Okay.
Something they really want to do. And sometimes like your interests will align in like a tattoo that you've kind of been thinking about is something they want to do. And so you can collaborate, and yeah, it happens.
Interesting. And
Hey, how about you?
well, no, mine are all family members. So, the tattoos that I have they represent a different family member. So yeah, I guess maybe I'd be too terrified that I'd regret whatever the hell I got if it was spontaneous. So, I mean, I have been thinking about getting, Beck Strah across my back, but
because we're family.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, I remember when I got to college watching, my teammates on the football team just, get there as freshmen. They all ran out. I work with the wrestling team here at Roger Williams, and boy, we had a wrestler who just graduated in the spring who's a tattoo artist as well.
Really?
Peter Tringali. Yeah, he was phenomenal, but he tattooed the whole team. I mean, everybody's running around with a tattoo, and you got to wonder, okay, you're 18, 19, how are you going to feel about, hey, my teammate gave me this tattoo in a couple years or 15 years about something that, you're not really sure you care about anymore. I don't know.
Yeah, that's exactly why I have never gotten a tattoo. When I was 16 or 17 years old, I really wanted a tattoo of my last name, Strah, in Old English on my back, but with a money sign in place of the S. And I'm so
money.
Thankful I didn't get this. I would be feeling silly about this now. So
no, you should have gotten that.
I should have gotten it.
Oh, you got to do that. That is perfect. Oh, I love that idea.
I feel like I would look very silly now as an adult with this tattoo. And I think that every time I think, oh, that seems like it would be a cool tattoo. I think, will this be 15 years from now? Will this be the money sign Strah tattoo?
What will it sag into is what you're saying?
Oh, no. Will it still be a good idea 15 years
definitely.
from now? Will I still care about having this, or will it look like a silly eyesore?
That would look great. I think if you get that now and you go to the beach, everybody, you got to have at least size 48 font there. We need this big across your shoulders. And yeah, I think you should do that. So yeah, it'd be fantastic.
Yeah. We'll work out designs together.
Yeah.
And this is no shade to anybody else who likes tattoos. As a disclaimer to the audience, it's more of a personal thing where I think my ideas will be silly to me 15 years from now.
Professor Strah is judging all of us with tattoos right now. He looks down on us.
This means you, listener. You.
We probably deserve it though. So
a little bit.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about some research on prison tattoos. There's a book called Beyond Bars: Rejoining Society After Prison. It's a book talking about reintegration into society, and the book finds from some research that inmates with tattoos have been shown to have a greater rate of recidivism than inmates in other groups that do not have tattoos, which is interesting. But the book warns that former offenders that employers often do not hire people with tattoos and piercings, and it recommends that they cover up tattoos and wear clothing that covers most of the body. And it warns them that many people in public will avoid them and look at them differently than they would others. Now, I don't know that this is still the case in the year 2024.
Right. Yeah, because they're becoming so common now. And I think it's not the tattoo that's going to keep somebody who has a felony conviction out of a job. It's having to check that box, on their application that I have a felony conviction.
Yes.
So, just because of what tattoos have become so common now. I think maybe in my research methods class this spring I can we can do a little study in the class and just have people, interview or survey people on campus real quick about, do you have a tattoo? And
indeed.
I bet you we're looking at 40, 50%. Wouldn't you think?
It's significantly higher than it would have been when I was a kid, for sure. And I would say I'm probably more of an outlier among my peers for not having one.
Definitely. You're way out there. You're three.
We got a good counterpoint.
Yeah,
there.
you are 3 standard deviations above the norm.
or below the norm. It depends on what standard we're looking at.
You are an outlier of outliers, my friend.
I'll take it as a compliment, I suppose. Yes. There's also an interesting study that was done in 2018 from Kelly Brown, Blake McKimmey, and Theodora Zaccardi. And the study was titled "The Defendant with the Prison Tattoo: The Effect of Tattoos on Mock Jurors' Perceptions." So they had a number of mock jurors look at defendants and what their perceptions of guilt were. And it was often dependent on tattoo style and location. And so what the tattoo was of and where it was located on the body. And they found that compared to non-tattooed persons, the participants recommended greater priority for police questioning when the subjects had prison-style tattoos on the face and neck. And they felt that people with prison-style tattoos were more dangerous than those with more modern-style tattoos. Participants also perceived individuals with prison-style tattoos as significantly more dangerous when their tattoo was located on the face or the neck compared to the arm. And so what we find from the study is that tattoos influence jurors' perceptions of individuals, and it's just introducing more bias, and that can impact decisions in court. It can impact sentencing in court. And keep in mind, this was a study with mock jurors. It's not a real case. But essentially what was done here was participants were shown photos of 5 men with tattoos. They were either more modern style or prison style on the face, neck, and arm. It was 30 participants in that. And then the second half of the study had photos of defendants who either had prison style tattoos or no tattoos. And they read a scenario describing a physical assault with either strong or weak evidence. And that one had 120 participants.
Okay. It makes sense, right? If, just we were talking about with inmates, why they might do it to look intimidating. They're going to look intimidating in the outside world to the average person. So, I think that's one of those, it makes, great sense. I think one of the things to take away from that study though, is do we allow inmates to, wear makeup foundation to cover their tattoos if they're on their neck or their face or their hands not inmates, people accused of crime during a trial. Do we allow them to cover it up if they want?
Right. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
That, or even finding a way to make sure that the physical characteristics of the defendant are not shown to the jury. Mm-hmm. Like put them in one of those shadow screens and turn their voice into one of get a modulator for it, like you would see on some documentaries where they're trying to hide who a witness is. Maybe we do that.
But are we taking it too far then? Because someone like me that looks like a wildebeest versus someone like you that's a beauty queen. Right? Gorgeous Beck Strah is never going to get the conviction, whereas I get sentenced to life.
But see, we want to remove all that bias.
We do.
Because what we look like doesn't change the facts of the case. It doesn't change the actions that occurred, right?
That's true.
So for your sake.
Yeah. Oh, I want to be hidden. Trust me.
You deserve that screen.
Put that brick wall up. Let me hide. And I need that modulator because I sound like a yak being tortured. You gonna take the stand? No.
Well, producer Britt and my yak friend. That's all the tattoo news I've got right now.
Oh, you know
Shall
what that
we move
means?
On to
movie.
I do know. Hit it.
Movie minute.
Let's do it.
Movie minute.
Movie minute. 60 seconds with producer Britt to talk about movies.
All right, it's movie minute time. Let's put 60 seconds on the clock. So this week, as we discussed last time, I watched 1974's Caged Heat, written and directed by Jonathan Demme, who you might know a little better as the director of Silence of the Lambs, Philadelphia,
Wow.
and Stop Making Sense, the Talking Heads movie. Absolutely iconic director. Very surprising he directed this.
Powerhouse.
So credited as one of the foundational films for the women in prison genre of films. We should probably call this genre the women in prison showers films due to its content. The movie centers around a couple prison breaks and revenge against a prissy prison warden and an evil perverted prison doctor. For all the requisite nudity in the film, there is a surprisingly interesting subplot, which might have actually been the main plot, but the real main plot was boobs. The subplot concerns the evil perverted doctor and his love affair with shock therapy for behavioral correction. The film ends in a giant shootout, which is not totally satisfying, but kind of fun. Overall, I think I'd give this one 2.5, maybe 3 soups. It wasn't bad, but a little bit heavy on, the shower scenes.
This sounds fascinating. And are you
I
encouraged for more ventures into the world of women in prison cinema?
I mean, there's 2 more Caged Heat films, and neither of them are directed by Demme. They're, they have a law of diminishing directors here. And so I can't imagine they get better. I can only imagine they just have more shower scenes as we go. So you know what? Yes, I am looking forward to the next 2.
Well, producer Britt, that's good news because you have been sentenced to watch Caged Heat 2.
Oh,
Oh, yes. Yes.
I'll deal with it.
Yeah.
This sounds interesting. Did you find any realism in the film at all besides the shower scenes and boobs? Was there any humanizing of the incarcerated women? Or was it more objectifying?
No, there was a humanizing of it. It starts out with like one of the main characters like getting caught, and both of her male ostensible co-defendants not getting caught, and it plays her in a pretty sympathetic light. It actually, does have a pretty sympathetic light for the kind of the 4 main women it centers around. Yeah, surprisingly.
I'm sure it's not done with subtlety or in a way like how an Orange Is the New Black would humanize, but it's good to see that they at least treated the incarcerated women like people to some extent.
Yeah, for a film from the mid-'70s, I wasn't really expecting them to humanize them quite as much as they did. But at the same time, they also very much objectified them in the shower. So,
all right. Well, there's that.
There's that.
Yeah. Can't have our expectations too high there.
No.
Right.
Yes. And Bronson, have you seen this one? I've not seen Caged Heat.
No, as I mentioned, I had, I used that assignment in my class, my corrections class, where students have to analyze 3 movies that are corrections based. And, I give the students a lot of latitude about what what the movies are. And they do not have to connect them, but if you want them to be connected in one way or another. So if you want to, do 3 movies about prison gangs, great. If you want to do 3 movies about child predators in prison, great. So I had a student years ago do the Caged Heat series, all 3 of them, and did a very good job of analyzing them. And, you know, the important part is that connecting the, you know, what's going on in the movies with the reality from the time and place. So, you know, the analysis of the amount of assaults that go on in prison, whether it's physical or sexual, and comparing it with what the numbers are during that time and wherever they're based, and men's versus women's prison. That's one of those things where the students really see how Hollywood has to do those things to try and draw us in, because I think a movie about what truly goes on in prison would not have anybody watch it, because it would be so damn boring, because it would be a movie about routine. You know,
Yes.
So, yeah.
They need something interesting like the shower scenes, or they need
A Prison Break, or
what? Prison Break. That's
riot.
exactly. They need a riot or an escape or something sexy and sensational, because most of the time prison is not that.
Yeah.
Right.
An evil
But
ward.
there's a few.
Something.
But it's interesting
Yeah.
to see, you know, a lot of these students pick that, you know, Shawshank Redemption. And one of the things they talk about is the corrupt warden. And yeah, they are able to find cases during that time period prior to the, you know, any type of government oversight over these prisons, where we see there were wardens who took advantage of the inmates and their, you know, prison work release programs. And, you know, it was essentially slave labor for these wardens, and they would make a killing taking these inmate groups out to work and undercutting any group out there with whatever manual labor type job they could find.
Yeah. Super interesting. What movie is that?
Shawshank Redemption.
Yes.
Yeah, I know you know that one.
I've heard of it. All right, team. Shall we close up shop?
Yes, sir.
Thank you for listening to Prison Breakdown. Please like, rate, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Eric, you got anything to plug, or is it time for lights out?
Yeah, I got nothing. This has been Professor Eric Bronson.
And I'm Beck Strah. Thanks for listening to Prison Breakdown. That's lights out.